And now we have a game that I've been hesitating to put on this list. Welcome and welcome back, everybody. Tia here, and in today's video we have another 5 disappointing games. As always with these videos, no ill will is meant towards anybody who worked on the games, nor anybody who's a fan of the games. These are just 5 games that could not scratch whatever itch it was that I thought that they would fulfill. And as always, I'll be providing recommendations. If you, similar to me, did not enjoy these games, these are alternatives that might fulfill what it is that you were looking for. Or if you were fans, these are great games to check out because you will probably love them as well. Without further ado, let's get started. The first game on this list is a game that hooked me as soon as I saw the cover with the title and the artwork, the publisher, and the main mechanics of the game. But unfortunately, it did not live up to my expectations, as you all know, and that is Demeter from Sorry We Are French. In Demeter, you're going to be flipping over cards in order to build a little engine to get different actions to build various types of buildings and breed dinosaurs. A little bit of a weird disconnect with the theme because you are doing this on the moon in space. I'm not sure. I think dinos were just really hot at the time. I don't know how much that factored into the decision to make it dinosaurs on the moon. That aside, the disconnect with the theming, unfortunately, this flip and fill style game did not fulfill the same joy that I get out of many other games in the genre. And this is one of my favorite genres of quick games to just kind of whip out and play. Demeter felt a little bit long, a little bit clumsy, if you will, with how the different elements worked together. And although the art is gorgeous on the cards and the box cover, the sheet itself is what it is. And unfortunately, there just wasn't a lot here that felt really satisfying in terms of triggering combos, or at least not to the degree that some other games that I've played have. I was particularly looking forward to this because Demeter is set in the same universe as Ganymede from Sorry We Are French, and this is a really quick and to the point engine building game. I had hoped that Demeter would give me a similar feel of satisfaction as Ganymede, but in a roll and write, flip and fill style feel. And unfortunately, it fell short of that, both in the mechanics and with the disconnect of dinosaurs on the moon. If you're looking for an alternative that really fulfills that itch of scratching off combos in a roll and write, flip and fill style game, my go-to is Doppelt so clever or Twice as Clever from Wolfgang Warsch. This line of games, in my mind, really kind of established the straightforward, abstract roll and writes. And while it may be cool to explore other themings and things like that, I always find myself coming back to this line of games mechanically. Doppelt so Clever is my personal favorite because as you draft dice, there's actually a power where you can put dice back into your pool, which is a huge mechanic of the game, and it just gives you so many more options and flexibility. So if you're looking for something a little more abstract and you don't mind a lack of theme, this would be a great one to try. If you are looking for something that has a little bit more of a space theme, that has some combos, this is not necessarily a flip and fill, but Wild Space really kind of scratches that itch for me. This is a game where you're going to be drafting cards that will give you certain actions and symbols, and as you draft more of them, you can set up really cool combos to chain together the actions on your cards. And with this one, it does have similar style, like very graphic, cel-shaded art, similar to Demeter. It's set in space. So for this one, it has a similar theme, has a similar feel to it in terms of the gameplay, although it is a very different mechanic of drafting cards versus a flip and fill. But this would be another alternative to check out in terms of the game length, the game weight, the style of the game, and the overall kind of play that you might have been looking for in Demeter. So that being said, unfortunately, although I really, really wanted to love Demeter and also the second one in the series, Varuna, I didn't feel comfortable investing in another game that seemed like it would be a similar version of a game I was really looking forward to, but that let me down. Next up, we actually have an expansion that is from one of my all-time favorite IPs ever in general, not even just in board gaming. And I'm sorry to say, but the Bloodborne card game expansion, ooh, what a miss. If you're not familiar with Bloodborne the card game, it is a simultaneous action selection game where you're going to be battling against different foes and trying to collect the most blood echoes while upgrading weapons and getting new items. The big selling point of the expansion was that it added unique hunter's marks, which you start the game with. These will give you certain abilities or different ways to score blood echoes and or use weapons throughout the game. Sounds amazing in terms of playability, right? And this is such a huge part of the original video games that I was really looking forward to integrating into the board game setting. In theory, it should have worked great. However, these Hunter's Marks were horribly unbalanced to the point where it's not even fun to just experiment and see what the different ones are. And unfortunately, because the game is not an overly complicated game, if you don't use your Hunter's Mark to its full ability, then you're likely to fall behind. And if you don't have the best Hunter's Mark, then there's probably just no way you're gonna win unless your opponents are just making like real dumb decisions. So it really kind of pigeonholes you in terms of strategy. And one thing I like about the base game of Bloodborne is that you can really try a multitude of different strategies. You can go for ranged weapons, you can go for instant attacks, you can go for setting up combos and then using like fire paper to just like completely obliterate one enemy. And the timing of when you do things and what order and the different types of weapons you can get really is great. Unfortunately, this just took all of that and put it into a tiny little box that wasn't even that appealing. So I would say if you're interested in trying out the Bloodborne card game, it is an excellent game. This is, in my mind, the game that took a video game IP and really did it justice in board game form. So hats off to Christopher Chung and Eric M. Lang, because I'm a huge fan of Bloodborne, huge fan of board gaming, and this was just such a treat to see come to life. But unfortunately, I can't say the same for the expansion. That brings us to our third game on the list today. Unfortunately, this was one that I backed on Kickstarter. I waited for a long time, was super excited for, and when it got here and I played it, just didn't do it for me. And that is Mini Rogue. So Mini Rogue was originally a 9-card print and play game. It was earlier into my print and play journey that I first discovered this game. I played through it and I thought, wow, how innovative that they got a whole dungeon crawl feel compacted down into 9 cards with fronts and backs and different abilities based on the dice that you roll. I just thought it was such a fantastic little package of a game in only 9 cards. Like, it blew my mind how somebody could take such a big concept and distill it down to its most essential parts and still make it engaging and of an appropriate length to where you could go through and you felt like you completed a whole dungeon crawl. So when Mini Rogue came to Kickstarter, of course I wanted to back it. I love supporting designers who put their games out there for free. Did I mention the 9-card print and play was free? And I thought, proof of concept, as 9 cards, this is amazing. If they expand it out a little bit, it's gonna only be even better with unique characters that give you different abilities and more dungeon cards, more enemies, more variability. I just thought, wow, I'm so excited. As I mentioned, unfortunately, the thing that I loved about Mini Rogue was that it was so innovative in how it boiled everything down. Once they expanded everything out into like 50 plus cards or what have you, it just felt like any other dungeon crawl game. And unfortunately, there wasn't any unique kind of draw to bring me in. It was rolling dice, resolving effects, tracking your health, tracking your gold, tracking your hunger. And it just left me feeling, I think the art and aesthetic of this game is great. I think if you're looking for just a very straightforward dungeon crawl, this is not the worst game. It's implemented quite well, but I was just really disappointed based on my initial playthrough of the original 9-card print and play. The excitement that I felt discovering that game for the first time and seeing how they were able to distill it down. The one thing that really drew me in beyond the theme and the artwork, unfortunately, was done away with, and it wasn't replaced with anything new to draw me in or to keep me around. If you're looking for an alternative in terms of dungeon crawls, I mean, let me tell you, Set to Watch Swords of the Coin is not only one of my favorite games in this dark high fantasy theme that is cooperative, that you can play solo, that has dice with unique characters, but it is one of my all-time favorite games to play solo. Period. This game is a little bit longer than Mini Rogue. It's a little heftier, but it is well worth it. This for me is like a gold standard because not only do you have characters that go out and fight monsters and have different unique abilities, but you also have a character that has to stay back and manage camp and be on watch for the night. And there are just so many amazing things in this game and how it comes together. It's not like any other dungeon crawl I've seen because here it's kind of more so like a tower defense where you're fighting hordes of enemies. The pacing of this game and how it ramps up at the end with the final horde of all the undefeated monsters coming back in the middle of the night is just, oh my gosh, it's such an invigorating experience of a game. So if you can check this one out, definitely do that. If you're looking for something that's a little bit more condensed down, that has dice and a dungeon crawl theme in the dark fantasy aesthetic, of course I have more, but One Deck Dungeon is a really great one to try out as well. It plays with 1 to 2 players, just like Mini Rogue, and in fact, if you have both Forest of Shadows and the original base game, you can play with up to 4 characters, which is actually really fun. This game is kind of a standard in that you build pools of dice as you go through, and you get different abilities and items that work in unique ways based on card text. I find that this game was a lot more satisfying than Mini Rogue for the length and size of the game. And I think the draw, again, like I said, for Mini Rogue originally was that it was 9 cards, was that it was like a 7-minute experience. And unfortunately, as a larger style game compared to some of its competitors, it fell short for me in that regard. And now we have a game that I've been hesitating to put on this list. In fact, it was a game that I avoided playing for quite a while because I felt like my expectation based on what I heard versus my expectation of what I saw for the game was not going to be great. In fact, this is a game that I have had requested over and over and over, both in like my personal board gaming life and here on the channel. But here we are, Skulls of Sedlec. Y'all know I love button shy. Y'all know I love micro games. Y'all know I love patterning games and spatial reasoning and setting up combos. Skulls of Sedlec has all of that. I love the theme, the idea of it, but this one fell really flat for me. In Skulls of Sedlec, you're going to be drafting cards and building a pyramid of skulls. Each card will have unique scoring. We're scoring objectives, and at the end, you'll see who has the most points. I know this is a favorite of many people. When I first heard about it, I thought, whoa, cool. I watched a playthrough and I thought, that's it? How is this such a huge favorite of so many people when it's just like digging the cards, flipping them up? I guess there's a little press your luck there with, are you going to reveal something your opponent might want, or drafting the different cards? It just felt like a more solitary experience in terms of the drafting, which I normally don't mind, but for a game that is just the drafting and sets, I would want a little more player interaction, I feel. Maybe it's the artwork, maybe it's the graphic design, maybe it's how the style of game comes together, but I feel that there are a lot of other drafting games that are more fulfilling, or a lot of other patterning games that are more fulfilling. So maybe it's just an unfortunate example of this was a game I didn't try till later in that experience, so I don't have that initial draw to it. And there were other games previous to that that I already enjoyed. So speaking of those other games, the first one that comes to mind is definitely Circle the Wagons from Button Shy Games. This is another 18 card game where you are going to be drafting cards and creating a grid. In this game, however, the backs of the cards have unique scoring objectives, kind of similar to Sprawlopolis, but this is the competitive version. And I find that that makes it a lot more interesting than taking the scoring off of the cards, because you get a lot more variability with the different objectives here. In addition to that, you're also trying to score your largest sets. So it's got some very similar mechanics to Skulls. One of the things I love about Circle the Wagons, though, is that the push your luck isn't necessarily in what comes up in terms of like random draws, but rather you can skip ahead in the circle to draft a card, but the remaining cards go to your opponent. So there's a lot more strategery happening here. I feel all the information is kind of there in front of you, and it really requires you to be acutely aware of what your opponent is doing at all times. Another game that comes to mind in terms of getting different scorings and even building a pyramid, and although this is a reverse pyramid, is Conspiracy from the Abyss universe. With Conspiracy, you are drafting different colors of lords, which will give you different abilities, collecting pearls, trying to get keys to unlock locations, trying to get bonuses of having the highest card of each color, but also maintaining a Senate chamber that has the most of one color that are joined consecutively. This one doesn't have necessarily any like unique scoring outside of the locations, but I just find the push your luck of uncovering cards in this one and the variability of scoring and the different things you're trying to go for to be a lot more appealing. I also have to say that Aesthetics definitely play into it. I love the look of the Abyss games. This is one that I will whip out way more often, and it also scales really well up to 4 players, which I find to be a huge selling point. So again, Skulls of Sedlic, not at all a bad game. I can see why some people would really enjoy it, but for me, I think it came along a little bit too late in my gaming journey to where I already had an established swath of games that had a similar feel that I really enjoyed more personally. Last but not least is a game that I found very early on into my board gaming career. It's kind of a standard in the industry, and while I did enjoy it at the time, it's now one of those very few games that I purposely will avoid or refuse to play at game nights. That is Mysterium. Mysterium has a very alluring concept. In the game, there's one person that's acting as the ghost, trying to give clues to the other parties at the mansion, and they're doing so through images, through limited communication, where they can only point to a specific idea on a card, and other people have to try to guess who murdered them and how it went down. The overall aesthetic of this game, the overall artwork, everything like that is super gorgeous. The production value is off the charts. And this is a game that I can see if you're really into role playing, if you're really into setting the mood. It's very alluring and very mysterious, but at the end of the day, mechanically, this game just falls so flat for me, especially compared to other games with similar mechanics. In this game, it's kind of strange because it's like if you vote yes on something that someone guesses or no, you get these little tokens, and at the end of the game, they contribute to like this clock face tower, and then based on how many of those things you got and whether you got the right answer, you determine a winner. It was just a weird in-between of a semi-co-op kind of feel where those extra bits felt kind of unnecessary. But at the same time, the game is quite long. If it was purely co-op based on the length of the game, it might feel less fulfilling because you've invested all of this time to all win or all lose. So I see maybe what they were going with there, but it's just really clumsy mechanically. And in terms of immersiveness and playing, unless you play this a lot, I found myself constantly having to go back, even though it was one of the few games I had in my collection at the time, and having to just really check like, okay, wait, you said yes, but you said no. This is how many tokens we get, blah, 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 blah. This is where you go on the clock tower. And unfortunately, that really took me out of the atmosphere and overall mood that I think Mysterium would have as an advantage above its competitors. The game that has head over heels replaced Mysterium for me. As soon as I got this game, I sold Mysterium, checked it out, is Deception Murder in Hong Kong. So this is a similar kind of idea where one person is a clue giver and they're giving different pieces of evidence based on words, and then you're matching them to evidence in front of people to try to deduce who is the murderer based on the weapon and evidence in front of them. So this game is cool because it has that element of hidden roles. It has that element of teams, and there's a clear win or a clear lose for particular teams. The expansion even adds different roles like the witness. So while this game maybe doesn't set the mood quite as well as Mysterium, I think for me, mechanically, overall, it's just so much more straightforward, so much more clear. The gameplay is quick and snappy. This is one that you can get through multiple rounds of back to back. And it feels like it's an appropriate length for the type of interaction that you're having with people and the deduction in this type of element. Another series of games that I have super come to love and have been playing the crap out of recently is Similo from Horrible Guilds. There are a lot of games where you have to interpret different artwork on cards and things like that, like Dixit, Muse, Deception. Like there are so many games like this on the market now, I feel. Similo does it in such a cool, unique way because you have a grid of cards, like let's say spookies. You'll have 12 spooky cards out, and the clue giver is going to be using a different deck, like myths. And they will have to show a character from myths that's either similar to the target card or different. And based on that, you can look at different elements of who is the person, what do they look like, what are they wearing, what were some of the traits. Each card has like a little history on the side of what the characters are. You can look at the background as well, different color palettes, like the color of their eyes. It's really cool, and this is a really fun one to just kind of see how people are thinking. It's very interactive. I find it's got a really fun atmosphere. There are many different decks that you can get based on your particular tastes of what kinds of aesthetic and what kind of themes excite you. And I just find that these are so quick and to the point. The rules are so simple. It's like, bup, bup, That's how you play. Let's go. And you can play them really quickly back to back and vary up the different packs and characters. This is just like a great one to have as a filler or a closer for game nights. And again, it gives you that same kind of style of cooperative clue giving using visuals, using deduction. So I would definitely check out Simulo. If you're looking for something a little more involved, you can check out Deception Murder in Hong Kong. But unfortunately for me, Mysterium is out of the picture. So there you have it. Those are 5 more disappointing games. Let me know in the comments down below, as always, if you agree or not. If you have any other game recommendations, I would love to hear them. And while you're down there, feel free to give the video a like. You can also subscribe and hit the bell if you want to be notified anytime I upload a new video. Thanks so much, as always, for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.